Hello, Jason. We are live
Hello.
once again.
Oh, so Stephen, it's Future Now number 6. Wow.
Can you believe it?
This far on the back of great content, darn it. Today we're going to talk about something that is of real importance, I think, to C-level marketers and anybody who is having a lot of communication with their target market. And it is really a measure that I don't think a lot of companies are using, and they should be. But this is more towards the leading edge rather than the old sluggish, slow, lagging indicators, right? Or vanity metrics that we often see. And it's called the voice of the customer. Mm-hmm. So, Stephen, you know a lot about this. I know you built a company called DataStorm Technologies from a raw startup all the way up to $50 million in annual revenue using exactly what we're going to talk about today. So we know, what the heck is the voice of the customer? That's the first question anybody watching is going to ask, right?
Sure.
And so we're going to define it as a process used to capture the requirements and feedback from the customer, internal or external, okay, to provide these customers with the highest quality products or the best-in-class service.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What more could you add to that, Stephen, since you're the go-to guy when it comes to voice of the customer?
Well, that is the definition. And the thing that's key to zero in on that has to do with capturing the requirements. That's key. I want to put a spotlight on that. Because if you think about a company creating a product or a service, you can presume that the market wants what it is you're working on and what you are going to bring to market. But if you don't have that outside in look and be thinking about what people actually want and what they will and what they need and what they will adopt and embrace, you could be kind of working in a vacuum. And so at DataStorm, we worked backwards from the customer experience to the technology. We had a staff of 60 programmers, and they had ideas. Some of them were very good about what the market would want, but some of them were very geeky. They were thinking like programmers. They were not thinking like the customers or consumers about wants and needs. They were thinking about like gee whiz things they could do as programmers, which is cool, but it doesn't make, technology does not a market make. As I told them countless times and tell people all the time. And it's not just technology. It's get the view from outside the company and figure out how you can create value for the customer.
So let's stop for a minute and concentrate. Let's take a closer look at this outside-in view that you're talking about here, about your company. Can you share more about that?
Sure. So there's a tendency for executives and owners of small businesses to be focused on their company. And that's kind of a duh thing. Of course they are. But, they're working in their company, they're working on their company, and they get to a point where they don't look from the outside in. We're too close to ourselves and too close to our companies to be objective. You can try to imagine what it's like to be the consumer or the customer and what it's like dealing with your product and what it's like dealing with your service offer and what it's like dealing with your company on a transactional level. But if you don't get that information from the outside, you're back in that vacuum that I mentioned before. And you'll have confirmation bias and things like that and think that you're doing better than you are about myriad of different things. But it's key to get that info from the market, from customers, and find out specifically what they think, what their opinions are. They will share them if you ask. And you can also get that information from your employees, especially the ones what I call at the edge of the organization, or the ones who are closest to the customer, or in the instances where they have direct interaction with customers, they have the info. They're hearing the stuff day in and day out. They know what customers like and what they don't like. They hear the complaints, they hear the compliments. That information is all key. That is what voice of customer is gathering that information. And it's a strategy for defining those requirements and creating products and services and processes to have a kick-ass operation.
I think this lines up nicely with a principle that I have learned from 20 years of creating marketing and sales funnels, which is you are not your customer.
Right.
And it sounds simple, but people need to hear it 1,000 times. And I'm not exaggerating, before it sinks in. Sometimes you tell somebody it twice and they get it, but most of the time you need to hear it over and over and over again. You are not your customer. And therefore, the values and the things that you think are interesting in that are not what your customer values or thinks are interesting at all. Having created hundreds of funnels, every time I go to write something, let's say a hook, to get people interested, whether it's for a commercial or for a sales page or something, I know I'm going to be wrong, and I have to go talk to that target market. Everything from a metal fabrication shop all the way to digital goods, right? It's what you think is going to be valuable is not what the customer actually thinks is valuable. You are not your customer. And so this principle that you're talking about, the voice of the customer, that we can create a program out of to start gathering this info and creating a feedback loop is super, super valuable. And I don't think that many people are doing it.
They're not. I mean,
to say it flatly.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. A lot of them say that they are, or they say that they're listening to customers, but the truth is that they're not really listening. They're kind of going through the motions. They say they're listening, but they're not listening to learn and listening to understand and listening to figure out what action items there are that can be done to help the customer, to provide value in your product, in your services, things that will save them time, save them money, give them a competitive advantage over their competitors.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff you just can't ascertain or through osmosis. If you're just in that inside view and you don't have the outside in component, which is so crucial. I mean, it's just essential that you have it.
Right. I'm flashing back to this Gary Vaynerchuk talk that he was giving to a bunch of credit union directors a few years back. And he was saying pretty much the same thing. Like, you guys are doing a lousy job of listening to your Gen Y customers, right? Your younger clientele, and why they, you can't market to them because you don't know what they're thinking and valuing. And a few of them, most of them were quiet. So, not really agreeing with him, but just staying quiet about it, not to argue. But a few actually got up and were like adamant in their opposition that they were indeed listening, and they were not as somebody who had watched an hour and a half of this, right, and listened to that. I was like, no, you're not. You are not doing anywhere near as good a job as these few people believed that they were. They were not adopting that outside in perspective that you were talking about. They were looking from the inside out, and it was leading them in the wrong direction. And the proof was in the pudding, as they say. It was The results were terrible. So voice of customer programs, that's a new idea for a lot of people, I think. That should be a way to get this information. What would that look like?
I'm not talking at this point about software programs. I'm talking about initiatives and processes.
Okay.
Voice of customer is actually a strategy. I mean, as you mentioned at the top of this broadcast, that there are metrics, and that's true. That's part of it. But first, let's back up and think of the strategy, which is the stuff that I've been talking about. What's the plan? The plan is to gather information from outside of the organization to define requirements. That's important. I know I said that again, but I think it's important to spotlight it. Define the requirements. You are getting rid of the internal biases and your own opinions about what the market wants and what they'll embrace. So that's what I mean.
And anybody watching, is this theory or fact? Well, 40 plus straight quarters of growth at DataStorm using these strategies is the proof in the pudding right there.
Yes,
voice of customer program work.
We had 40 consecutive quarters of profitable growth, it's not an accident. That success was so tied to listening to customers on an ongoing basis and taking what they said and putting it into action, taking their feedback and putting it into the product and into processes too. I mean, we've learned sometimes that as a raw startup, making decisions on the fly about things that came up that had never come up before. There was no precedent. I'd make a decision, and then 2 years later, I'd find out through customer service that that's an issue. Like, you've created a struggle point and some friction in dealing with the company. It's like, okay, that is wonderful to know. I mean, a lot of people have problems with that. I mean, they don't want to hear the bad news, but that's how we learn. It's
right. No, let's hear that there's cancer and we need to cut it out. Let's hear that we need to do a little process surgery here.
Precisely.
Absolutely.
I mean, human beings learn by making mistakes. But if you don't realize, I made a mistake there, and we learn from them and we improve, and it's a continuous thing. And companies need to be exactly like that. The goal should be continuous improvement, continuous evolution to provide the very best customer experiences, the best products, the best services to the customer. I can't say it emphatically.
It's a question of where is your awareness on?
Yeah.
Right. It's fail forward and all that, but please learn something from it and be open to it and just regard it as feedback, not an emotional personal assault. All right. So we have internal customer, voice of customer programs and external voice of customer programs. Let's just touch briefly on those two and define the difference.
Sure. The internal is the what I spoke about just a few minutes ago, which is the people within your organization, actual employees that are at the edge, so they're close to the customer, or optimally, if there's direct customer interaction, those individuals, they have information that is really valid. So the mindset that an executive might have is like, oh, that's just so-and-so. They're a lowly peon, or, that is a terrible attitude. Those people are in touch. And when's the last time someone in the C-suite or an executive rolled up their sleeves and got down in the trenches and dealt with customers? It's not very often, really. So It's a really foolish thing to do, to be dismissive of the feedback that you're getting from your employees. You should be very open to that. I mean, they're the ones with the, it's not just that they have their ear to the rail, so to speak, and kind of hearing the signals faintly and trying to decipher them. They're hearing specific things because they're talking to the customers. So
that signal to noise ratio is quite strong.
Yeah, so there's a strong tendency for executives to be dismissive of what Joe and Sally said down in customer service, because they're there's several layers beneath the C-suite, but that doesn't mean that the information they have isn't useful and isn't valid. And
so from an internal voice of customer standpoint, you want to create a process that feeds that data from the edge of the organization on up. And I know that blockage that you've been talking about, that resistance, is true because I worked for many years giving sales training programs to companies, and the vice president of business development would be at such a layer of abstraction out from the front lines that they would flat out tell me, I don't know what's going on with the frontline salespeople. That's my sales manager's job to handle that, and I don't care. All I care about are my P&L and my quarterly quota numbers, right?
Doesn't surprise me to hear that.
Problem.
But gosh, there's a real danger in that mindset.
Yep.
I mean, just the fact that
I'm terrified by it whenever I encounter it. It makes me go away now. I won't work with that person.
Just the fact that they admit that they don't know what's going on, that's problematic when you're in a leadership role in the C-suite or a VP level or director level or whatever level. If you're making decisions and they're not based on data, it's just, your gut serves you well to a point, but only to a point. And again, there's all these confirmation biases and stuff that we have that we're not conscious of. Those things are inherent. Confirmation bias is inherent to the way we think and make decisions. So it doesn't take much to have dashboards created for executives to get little snapshots of what's going on. Do they want to be at the level that their sales manager is? No. That's why they have a sales manager. But just to think, well, that's on him or that's on her.
That's where it stops.
That's crazy. That's crazy to me. It really is. It doesn't make a bit of sense as far as running a company.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine a farmer that doesn't know what's going on in their field?
That's a great analogy.
Right. No,
You always have great analogies, Jason. You really
hard
do.
on them secretly at night.
Do you?
No. I just do whatever comes in my head because
you just have that intuitive, you get it. You're a quick thinker, and you come up with analogies that stick and that resonate. Because let's talk about that for just a second. I mean, literally, think about a farmer who doesn't know what's going on with this field. He hasn't checked the weather. He doesn't know, how much irrigation this crop needs. There's a pest out there, eating away at your valuable crop, and you don't use the insecticide. You're not using the right fertilizers because you're like, that's the corn.
All I'm interested in is how much am I going to sell this thing on the futures market.
That's the corn's problem. That's the wheat's problem. They need to take care of it themselves. They need to get strong and just fight off those pests and boll weevils that are eating. Yeah,
or worse, that's the mechanic's problem who runs the harvester. Let him take care of that stuff, right?
Yeah, so think about applying that. Just take that as an overlay and set it on top of a company, and that's what we're talking about. It's like, okay, I have no input. And besides taking it up to the C-suite, it's really important. I want to stress this as well, that it goes across the company, not just up, but across. I'm talking interdepartmental. So when you talk about like a problem that we had at DataStorm that I mentioned earlier, making a decision on the fly as an early startup with 5 people, 7 people, cut the people on the phone, they're like, put the person on hold, literally like, Stephen, blah, 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 blah. What do we do? And I was like, okay, this makes the most sense right now. Okay, 2 years later, fast forward, it's like the issue comes up that from the decision I made 2 years ago that made sense at the time, now you're a $5 million or $7 million annual revenue and have 40 employees. It didn't make sense. It caused friction. The bigger the organization is, the harder it is to communicate across the organization. We get into silos and little islands, and it's really important that something that is a process-related problem gets over to operations so that they can work on it. I mean,
so an internal voice of customer program will bring that data in, bring it up, spread it across the organization, and have some sort of triage system, I guess, to figure out what's important to work on and in what priority order. And that's going to give you your continuous improvement. How about the external voice of customer program?
That's where the real data lies. It is outside the organization. The voice of customer programs that are absolutely killer are the ones that systematically listen to customers and use that information to take action, to monitor your performance over time. Social listening programs and social monitoring programs, and by those, when I say programs, I'm talking about platforms. I'm talking about software as a service type platforms that allow you to get that external information, are amazing. They're actually pretty remarkable. And there's so much data out there. And, data that your customers aren't sharing with you directly, but they're sharing with each other. They're sharing with family and friends. They're talking about on Facebook. They're talking about on Twitter. They're in comments on YouTube. They're in online chats. They're pretty much anywhere on the semantic web is where those programs, those social monitoring, social listening programs, they scrape that information based on keywords that you set up, and they give you so much insight. And going back to what we talked about a bit ago, there isn't that bias. Actually, maybe we spoke about this for a moment right before we went on air, like focus groups. I mentioned to you, I'm not a fan of focus groups for getting external information, because the focus group has a tendency, or a very strong propensity actually, to unintentionally and subconsciously give you the information you're looking for. And that's not what you want. You don't want a yes man or a yes woman saying, Stephen, you're the best. Jason, you guys are awesome. It's like, tell me the truth. I mean, so
give me the unfiltered.
I want unvarnished truth. Be brutal, If it sucks, it sucks. We want to know where the problems are, and we want to know what you love, because we certainly want to give you more of that, which only makes sense. So it's hard to describe how vast that is, the semantic web. And you've got these keywords, and you're seeing, like your company name would be a keyword, your brand name, if you have a brand, your product, your service. And the other thing is competitors, company names, their brand names. So you learn all sorts of stuff about what customers like about your competitors' offerings.
Right. Or
dislike. So you might not be hearing anything about or complaining about with a competitor's product, and you learn from that. And
if they bomb over there,
sure, that gives us an opportunity
learn from that. If you're watching, right? We'll do that better, and then publicize the heck out of it.
Exactly.
Right? We do this amazingly well now. Ooh,
it's like learn from others' mistakes, but you won't do that if you're not looking outside the organization. You just won't. I mean, the information doesn't reside inside your organization. It's out there, and there are great tools to use to get it. You have to then implement what you learn,
right,
and take action.
So there has to be a process for that. Now, in a voice of customer program, obviously requirements are key. Like, what do customers want? Let's say, right? What do they value? That kind of thing would probably be a place I would start at. Right. What kind of things are we typically measuring or checking in these programs?
We're trying to determine sentiment. That's key. We want to know what consumers think and what your existing customers and potential customers, or what they think about a product or a service or a company, and match that. Create things that are in sync with what they find valuable. And
so something that would make their lives easier or save them time.
Save them time, save them money, save them headaches.
So we're looking for almost a qualitative values here, and then we're going to gather those up and turn them into something quantitative.
Yes,
like we've got to make it 3 inches longer or last another 9 months or something like that.
Again, great analogies. I mean, it's it's situational depending on your company and what you're trying to do and where you are in the market. If it's a product, if it's a service, if it's both, you need to avoid any kind of vanity metrics. I mean, just looking at likes on Facebook and followers on Twitter, that's not what we're looking for. We're doing a deep dive. We're looking for, we're trying to get in the heads of
our
consumers.
Buyers.
Of buyers and consumers and customers, and again, understand what they want, what they need, what they value. Maybe part of your product or service offering isn't something that people care about. So why offer it? Why offer it? I mean, that's a thing where it's like, okay, let's pare that back. Again, this is all part of a systematic process of continually gathering information, looking at it. So you're analyzing it to determine if it's valid and how important it is, and then acting on it. Acting on it so that it affects the customer, and obviously affects them in a positive way. That's the goal, is to give them a better experience and give them reasons to stay with you as a customer and be loyal, or, win over new business.
So I know you've done some research and have got some statistics ready about how companies feel that they're doing as far as concentrating on customer experience or gathering information about what they think is valuable. How are they doing? What do they think they're doing, and how are they doing? Because we always see this disconnect, don't we?
There's a huge disconnect. Okay, so anyone who's followed these broadcasts probably knows that what Jason just said is that there's what they say they're doing, and then there's what they're actually doing. So 95% of companies say that they regularly listen to their customers. That's almost everybody, 95%. That's a huge chunk, obviously. But only 29% of firms with voice of customer programs in place systematically incorporate the insights about customer needs into their decision-making process. So that's something I spoke about earlier, but now I'm giving some stats to back these things up. And this information comes from Gartner Research. Just give them credit for the tremendous research they do. They provide them and Forrester and Aberdeen just great information. So nearly 3/4 of those companies don't think that their voice of customer programs are effective at driving actions. So
if you do the multiplication here, it's
yes,
less than a third have a system in place, and three-quarters of those don't think that they work.
Exactly. I mean, you
Wow.
nailed it. And when you laughed, that was the appropriate response. It's like, it's a big WTF.
Well, you guys are really bad at this. Yeah.
It's a big WTF question. It's like, what is going on here?
So we got this. Most companies say that they're listening to the customer.
95%.
Very, very few are actually achieving anything with it.
Right. Because there's this huge breakdown in taking the data and collecting it and then looking at it and doing something with it. And it's what I spoke about earlier. I mean, there's this tremendous tendency for executives and C-suite people and business owners to just be focused internally. That's why this happens. Is, I don't know if it's intentional or what. I mean, I can't get in their minds because I don't think this way. I think let's talk to people on the outside who are looking in and get their viewpoint and understand clearly. We need to understand our customers. We really do. I mean, that's not something that should be taken for granted. And
right.
So
you have a statistic there from HBR.
Okay, so Harvard Business Review noted that marketing decision makers in the Fortune 100 use data just 11% of the time to make decisions that affect customers. So the Fortune 100 got Harvard Business Review with the research, and just 11% of them.
Right. You all should be flabbergasted by this number. They're saying the Fortune 100 executives are using data just 11% of the time to make decisions that affect customers. Think about that. It means that 9 times out of 10, basically,
yes,
the executives of these big companies are making decisions on what? Gut feel? Intuition?
Ego?
Rune casting?
Exactly.
Wow.
It's so short-sighted.
Yeah, I mean, and there is a rollover of Fortune 100 companies all the time.
Sure.
They're coming and going out. Stuff that was there 50 years ago, or what, and that's accelerating too. We know that. There are probably other factors as to why that churn is occurring on that list. But
across the whole Fortune,
listening to your customers, it seems, as you say, very short-sighted. I mean, I don't think they're going to stay there for very long, do you?
No, I mean, it goes across the whole Fortune 500, and it's a symptom of, just the way the companies think. And, it's interesting when you're younger and you don't have much business experience, you tend to think that these huge companies and these huge brands, I mean, they know everything. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're really smart people. And they may be, but they make a lot of mistakes.
That inward focus, really.
Yeah, and it creates the mistakes they make. Create great opportunities for early stage companies to go in and, flank them or use, full on, like we did at Data Storm. Besides flanking, we did full frontal attacks. Like, we're going head to head with you, Microsoft. I don't care how big you are. It doesn't.
And you sent Microsoft running on at least one memorable occasion.
They actually did a strategic retreat from the market. They took their product called Access, was the name of their data communication software. It didn't really matter how much they spent on marketing, which was a lot. And they turned the proverbial guns of Navarone on us. I thought Access was a really cool name for a product to do data communications. But Access was about the only thing cool about that product was the name. And a lot of people would say, oh, Access, well, you're confused. That's the database part of the Microsoft Office suite. Well, they took that product out of the market, put the name on a shelf for about 5 years, and then I forgot what company they acquired. It doesn't matter, but it was a typical Microsoft thing where they got into the space based on acquisition and took the name Access off the shelf, brushed it off and shined it up and stuck it on the name of their
based program.
Yeah,
now.
so this was the quintessential David versus Goliath story. I mean, we didn't slay Microsoft. I mean, they still exist, but we slayed their product. It was just such a cool thing for them to make a decision internally to retreat. Like they just took the product off the market. They could not get sales. They could not get market share. It didn't matter that they've got, millions, hundreds of millions to spend on marketing and try to convince people. If the product didn't work well compared to what the other offerings were, like Procom, people go to the
thing that works.
They're going for the customer experience that works for them.
So let's hear what happens if you're a company that has a great voice of customer program. What happens?
Remarkable things. You basically blow the competition out of the water.
So a statistic for that would be
Aberdeen Group. Their recent research that they conducted revealed that companies with best-in-class voice of customer initiatives enjoy almost a 10 times greater year-over-year increase in annual revenue compared to all other companies. 10.
Okay. So there's your proof in the pudding.
I mean, 10 times.
Like 10 times greater annual revenue increase?
It's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So why aren't they doing this? Because it's work? Because they are so stuck in the inward focused perspective?
That's my opinion.
I guess you've already said, we can't get into their heads, but wow.
Their behavior demonstrates what they're doing or what they're not doing. When you consider the upside potential here.
Yeah, I just go, why wouldn't you do this?
There is no reason not to do this. There is no downside to doing it.
It clearly pays for itself incredibly well, and you get better results for everybody out of it. So what else happens? You've got some other research here from Gartner.
Yeah, from Gartner. The companies that excel in voice of customer initiatives and do it really well enjoy 55% greater customer retention rates. They have an average 25% decrease in year-over-year customer service costs. They have an increased upselling and cross-selling success rates of 15 to 20%.
Okay, so I'm a conversion expert, not a traffic guy. I'm a conversion guy. So, I mean, customer retention, number one thing on the list, right? Easier to sell to somebody who's already a customer. And the longer, if you've got a subscription type product, continuity product, the longer that you can get that customer to stay, obviously, the more profitable it is. It costs a ridiculous amount more, 5 to 7 times, maybe more, to get a new customer than it does to keep an existing customer, right?
Exactly.
So not only then what I'm seeing from these statistics is not only does a good voice of customer program make companies a lot more money each year, it also saves you money.
Right.
Right. I mean, decreasing customer service costs by 25% year after year is going to add up.
Big time.
I mean, that's all minimized expense. So fatter bottom line.
Exactly.
Another reason, I guess, why you would do this. I mean, it seems crazy not to.
So you've got a fatter bottom. You've got a fatter bottom line, and you have top line revenue that's 10x of those who aren't doing good voice of customer initiatives. I mean, so back to your question, why wouldn't you do this? I mean, there is no reason. It's just like it's an imperative as far as I'm concerned. It's a business imperative. It's a strategic imperative, and it works. I saw a statistic just in the last few days that the return on investment of these type of voice of customer initiatives is 7,500%. So think about that. You put $1 in, you get $75 back. I mean, I do that all day long.
That's massive. Yeah, most people are happy if they get $1.25 back for that dollar.
And, as far as an analogy that comes to my mind, I think about going to a change machine. I put $1 in, I get 4 quarters. What if you put $1 in, you got $75 worth of quarters, and it was that big,
Yeah, now that's called a slot machine, Stephen.
Well, I was just going to say the Las Vegas casino sound of the tokens hitting that tin container. Yeah, the ting 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 ting. I mean, that's the visual that comes to my mind. It's like, okay, so why wouldn't you do this? It's huge, 10 times more revenue year over year. Not that fluke year where you had a 10x on your revenue. year over year. 25% savings on customer service costs year over year. It's like,
Right.
It's like,
Yeah. You can start seeing what happened with you in DataStorm and why the chart
and
goes like that.
To your question and your point earlier, it's one of those things that's like, hello, McFly. So the other thing that's really cool that happens, and this is from Gartner as well, is that there is a direct impact on customer experience. When you are doing great voice of customer initiatives and systematically getting that information, analyzing it, taking action on it, the impact on positive customer experience is profound. And keep in mind that a customer experience lives in the mind of the customer. So to be more specific about that is that customers make decisions about and form opinions about how they feel regarding a company or a brand based on how they feel that the company is treating them. So how they feel. That goes back to what I was talking about earlier when you were asking me about, what are we looking for? We're looking for sentiment. We're looking for how do they feel? Because we're not going to know that internally. Back to this thing, man. I don't mean to be
We give great customer service.
Yes, I don't mean to be redundant about this. It's just it really bears repeating.
Right. Well, I can see that. It's rampant and just we have a process for that, or blaming the customer, stupid customers. Why don't they do it this way, right? And I can think of three sort of divisions of that qualitative sentiment, if you will. If you exceeded the expectations, then it's a great experience. If you met expectations, then it's a good experience. And obviously, if you didn't meet an experience, that's a bad experience, right? If you didn't meet the expectations. So there's three slots you could start dropping data into and learning from right away.
Well, and if you didn't meet the expectations, knowing what we know from previous broadcasts, customers don't have much patience for
that tune out, and
they leave. They just go
and scream.
They hit the eject button quickly, and they bitch about it a lot online and make noise about it, and so other people know.
And if you're I'm not paying attention to that because
it's crazy to not pay attention.
Who wants them anyway?
It's just crazy. So customer experience leaders are voice of customer leaders. I mean, they go hand in hand. This is back to Gartner. Overall, voice of customer leaders are better at just about everything. And the upside that I spoke of is their ability to systematically collect the info, analyze the data, and then follow up. And they have the ability to put those insights into action in a way that affects the customer, their experience, and their dealings with the product, the service, etc.
So let's get into a few examples, because I know we're getting close on time here. A few examples of some great customer experience leaders.
There are three that are just killer. So Zappos, they say the number one tool they can use at any company is listening, and backing this up with action. And here's the quote. They respond to every single customer inquiry via telephone, email, live chat, Twitter, Facebook, or the Zappos blog, end quote. According to Zappos, many of their experience improvements are inspired by the feedback from customers. So this is what we've been talking about.
And they have been on top a long time. In my last corporate senior management role was in 2012, and our company president was singing the praises of Zappos back then, 6 years ago, right? So it's not like they did this for a bit and then dropped it or weren't committed to it or anything. This is built into their culture.
It is. And I forgot the title of Tony Heisch's book about this very thing. They will do anything to satisfy a customer and make the experience great so that you will talk about it and you will tell friends like, I can't believe, they did X or they did Y, and it's just killer. Apple is another example. So listening to the customer at Apple is more than lip service. They're not one of the 95% who say they do it and don't really put it into action. To that end, their CEO, Tim Cook, reads and sometimes responds to up to 100 customer emails every day. So, let's juxtapose that back to the example that you gave of the sales executive who I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's the sales manager's responsibility. Right. So Tim Cook is looking at what customers are saying directly. He's looking at emails and he's replying to them personally, as many as 100 a day. He's reading 100 a day.
Wow.
But he's replying to sometimes that many a day as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation. So, I mean,
that man has to have a really tough mindset.
Well, I mean, the point I was trying to make there is that if he has the time to do it and he thinks it's important, I mean, look at Apple's success. It's like, okay, there's really something to this.
Yeah. Just to hop back to Zappos for a second, delivering happiness.
That's right. That's right.
Name of the book.
Thank you.
Kindle Unlimited, $0.00 on Kindle Unlimited, and also the Zappos 2009 Culture book happens to be on for a quarter on Amazon.
Does it? Okay.
I find that very interesting. I might pick that up.
So the last example of the three is Amazon. Jeff Bezos, their CEO, has the same mindset as Tim Cook. And while he doesn't respond directly to emails, he reads them and he forwards them to employees within his organization and demands that they
fix this.
Fix this. And he wants it fixed within a couple hours. So, Amazon, another company that we can't argue their success. I mean, who doesn't know about Amazon or Apple? And just the way that you feel when you deal with them. For the most part, I mean, there's exceptions.
Everybody screws up, but they have the voice of customer program, they have the feedback loop, and the top executives are looking.
That's so important. Let's talk about that for just a second, that the top executives are looking. So you talked about culture. If the top executives are doing it, then there's a top-down mandate and understanding throughout the organization that this is important.
Right.
This isn't a random thing. This is what we do. This is how we function. We are listening.
It's not just a department's problem.
It is not.
It's everybody's issue.
And that's going back to what I said a bit earlier about interdepartmental, cross-departmental. Spread the information. What you learn needs to be taken out of that silo of your mind or your department and shared across the board.
Right.
Because there's learning, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what nugget of information or little pearl of wisdom someone in the organization might get from what you shared. So having those systems in place is really important.
You know what these guys have understood, Stephen, and I think I'm actually just getting it now myself, is that the key to retaining customers is not the price or the product, the features, anything like that. It's that customer experience.
It's the customer experience. And to that end, we've talked about this before on previous episodes. Customers are willing to pay more money for better experiences. Like 86% of them are willing to spend 10 to 40% more money to get an exceptional customer experience.
And that's just a simple example. I was looking at getting something online. I found it on eBay and I found it on Amazon. And the Amazon price was higher, and I bought it on Amazon because I'm a Prime customer.
Or you bought it on?
Yeah, the vast majority, almost 9 out of 10 customers being willing to pay a serious premium for a better customer experience is something that I totally buy into.
Yeah. So, and companies need to take that to heart. They really do. I mean, you're not competing on price.
Right.
You're competing on
customer experience.
Yeah, and you're not competing on features. And Gartner again is the source on this, but they say that 89% of companies admit that they're competing based primarily on customer experience, which really begs a question that I can't answer. And I know that it's no fault of yours that you don't have the answer either. It's like, why aren't more companies doing this?
Yeah,
I mean,
it just keeps coming back, isn't it? I mean. So is collecting feedback as simple as asking your customers questions to uncover those expectations? Were they met, that get that qualitative answer that we were looking for, that sentiment?
Yes, that's the place to start.
So how do you recommend doing this? What's a good way to get started?
To ask them.
Yes. Okay.
I was being silly there. I mean, it's just kind of a pregnant pause on purpose. It's back to external focus. So one thing that we've all seen, I don't know what it's called, but they call it NPS, which stands for Net Promoter Score, which was developed in 2000, 2003 or 2002 by Bain and Company. So they haven't been around that long, but we see them all the time. And that's the little, like at a restaurant or a place where you're getting your oil changed, there's like a little postcard that says, how likely are you to recommend us to a colleague? And, it's a 1 to 10 scale, and you mark the box, or I guess it's 0 to 10. I misspoke. Not 1 to 10. 0 to 6, anyone who marks in those parts of that score are considered detractors. They have negative things to say. They're not going to recommend you for none, but they're probably going to say negative things. So knowing that is really good, because if they share what the problem was or why they wouldn't recommend you, that gives you, back to your analogy, like triage. It's like, okay, we need to fix this. Or do we? Was this just one person who's never happy about anything?
Right.
There's a discipline involved in this where you have to decipher what I call weak signals from the very overt ones. If you hear the same thing over and over and over, you've got a problem.
Right. It's a real thing.
Yeah, if you hear it one time from someone who is extremely vocal about it, they might just be one of those kind of people that wants a refund on everything and just complains about everything and has a form letter that they change the name of the company and they send the complaint because they want free coupons and things like that. That's a weak signal. That doesn't require action.
Mm-hmm.
So people that mark 7 to 8 on the net promoter score, they're considered passive.
And it's a much higher number than you might think. Like, I'm sure people would come into this thinking, a 5 or 6 would be a passive rating.
Yes.
But
I see what you're saying.
7 to 8 is much higher on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are not fully bought in.
They're not. And again, if you can understand why they're not or what the problem is and don't have the mindset you said, like stupid customer. So it kind of begs the question too, like, is the customer always right? Well, in their mind, they are. And that's where they live. That's where their experiences happen and where they think of it. Of course, it's in their mind. So if you can get into that and suss that information out. So the top ones are people who mark 9 to 10. And those are the promoters. So those are people that are brand advocates. They have loyalty. By brand advocate, I mean, they're very likely to be talking positively about the customer experience or your brand or your company or the product or the service. They're saying good things, and that's awesome. We want that positive word of mouth. It's the best form of marketing that there is unsolicited testimony from someone you know, like, and trust, a family member, a friend. It's hard to explain in mere words how important this is to get this information and to analyze it and act on it so that it affects the customer positively and affects the customer experience positively.
Right. So very cool. I think that winds us up for today, Stephen. I really have enjoyed digging into this topic because I've known for a while it's one that you know a lot about.
Love
and
it.
Clearly is important, but not understood by many, many big companies and executives at those companies. And they could obviously get great value out of implementing that. And I think you can help them if they wanted to call you up and say, Stevie, could you help us with this? This is a program, a voice of customer program that you could implement at
absolutely
somebody's organization.
And have had tremendous success with it a number of times. Besides the huge data storm example, it's an imperative. It is mandatory. Right. It really is. It needs to move up your level of awareness and move up on your priority scale and get up there. High-ranking thing to implement.
Right. Yeah, and I'm really glad that we had data and real practical examples of this stuff, and it's not just a theory, it sounds good. No, here are numbers.
Yeah.
Here are things that have actually been impacted, businesses that have experienced big-time growth.
Yes, and the data is from those bona fide experts as far as the research companies like Forrester, I guess it was Gartner and Aberdeen. I mean, these are real pros. They've been doing this stuff for a long time, and they get wonderful data that I love to share.
Right. Well, I'm Jason Kanigan. That is Stephen Monaco. This has been episode 6 of Future Now, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Next week. Thanks, Jason.
You bet.